Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Getting back to work on the Cobra in this video. In the last video, I was starting to look at the fuel system as far as where I was going to mount things. I'd also, gone through some of the cooling system items, more parts ordered to try and get that put together, and also was just kind of doing some stuff cleaning up the engine bay. So I'm going to get back to work on the car and get into it. All right, so as you can see, I did pull the turkey pan back off the car, remove the throttle body so I could get that out because I am going to go ahead and mount the fuel regulator on the firewall back there, so I needed some space. So that's out of the way. Also on the other side, I did remove the charcoal canister that was sitting there along the rail. It was bolted in that space there behind the rail where that brace goes down. I'm going to relocate that back to the rear of the car since it's no longer hooked up to the vacuum lines from the old Ford EFI system. I know I really in theory don't need it, but if it cuts down on the vapors a little bit, so be it. But I can put it probably above the rear end where the battery used to be. There's a big open area there, so that's most likely where I'll relocate that to. But yeah, I've got the fuel pressure regulator, going to put it there. I've got a bunch of other parts on order, as I went over in the last video for the lower radiator hose, try and get that sorted out. I also ordered a new speedometer cable. I found a company online because this has the factory Ford end on it, whereas the Autometer speedo gauge has a screw-on type of end, and I wanted that to make sure I had the right type of hookup on the gauge. So I've got that on order, but it has that on one end and the other end has a T5 style input, but it doesn't have the speed sensor anymore. So it'll eliminate the need for the speed sensor, which I'm no longer using. So that cable's on order. I hope to have that in a few days. And then once I get that in, I can start messing around with trying to get the mileage back up on the speedometer because I've been messing around with it here and there with a drill. I've got it up to about 90 miles, I think, on it so far. It takes a while. So I'd like to be able to have the cable and just kind of set it up on the drill and just let it run for a few hours and go through a few batteries that way and get the mileage up because I need to get about 2,100 miles, I think, off the top of my head on it so it matches the speedometer that I pulled out. So anyway, going to get back to work and start looking into getting the fuel pressure regulator mounted on the firewall. All right, so I'm looking at the regulator. This is the bracket it comes with. It'll go either way. You can have the tab up or tab down. I actually think I'm going to mount it this way just because it'll be easier to mark the holes and everything versus having the regulator in the way and trying to hold it up against there and mark up the firewall. So I'm just going to do it this way. I can mark the two bottom holes, get those drilled, get it mounted, and then do the third hole once it's mounted. And then I can go ahead and start adjusting the lines accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead, get this taken apart, get it mounted up, installed, and go from there. All right, and there you can see bracket is installed on the firewall. I got it leveled up and everything. 3 bolts going through to the other side, as you can see right there. So all set as far as that goes. I can go ahead. I'm going to clean up the regulator, get the gauge installed into it with some sealer, and then I can get that mounted on the bracket. All right, and here we go. Regulator and gauge installed. I did spray out all the ports with some brake cleaner just to make sure there's nothing in there. Installed the gauge with some the sealant on the threads. I used the same ARP thread sealer I used on all the head bolts, and then just tighten it down with a 7/16 box wrench. So good to go there. You can see there's clearance plenty for the feed line, and there'll be plenty of clearance for the return line, which goes underneath, and then the feed line for the fuel rail will wrap around and just clip right onto the other side there. There's enough clearance between it and the throttle linkage. So all set. Next on the list is going to be to reroute the feed and the return line that are underneath the car over here. So they will come up over there and I can get them hooked up to the regulator. All right, so here is underneath the passenger side of the car. You can see the lines running from the back. And right now they're jogging over here and then run up there to where they were going to the fuel rail. What I'm going to do is remove those 2 clamps or loosen those clamps, remove the lines from there, and then I can jog them up that diagonal there along the footwell and then get them up to the fuel pressure regulator, which is up there behind the engine. So that is what I'm going to work on doing right now. All right, so you can see I got 1 clamp there, just kind of guiding them this way now so they can go up along in here. And then I'll probably try and get a clamp on that 1-inch square tube there just to keep them off the starter and the side of the block. You can see I have a mark right here on this line. I had the fitting on the fuel pressure regulator and marked it the length I need it. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the cable cutters there to cut this. I'll probably put a small hose clamp on the end and just kind of work the strands in to make sure there's no frays, and then I can get the fitting on it. So I'm gonna get to work on that right now. All right, one line in, fittings all on and whatnot. Not gonna lie, not being able to put that in a bench vise to do the fitting installation, total pain. Had to use 2 large crescent wrenches, as you can see down there. So I mean, it marred up the fitting a little bit, but I really don't have a choice. The cable or the hose is already in the car, so I can't exactly take it over to a bench vise to install it. So, but it's in. Use the AN wrench to get it installed on the regulator. So one down. Next we'll be cutting and installing the return line. All right, and there we go. Return line is installed and tightened on the bottom of the regulator. That one was a little bit more difficult than the larger feed line. Yeah, the braid just wanted to keep sprawling apart. Both of them I ended up using electrical tape, just a thin layer around the top just to help get the sleeve over the braided line at first. And then, yeah, cranked it down same as I did the other one. Again, was kind of a pain in the butt because I wasn't able to clamp it in a vise, but it is now installed. So I do just still need to get a clamp down there to hold it to the square tube so it's not rubbing on the engine. But other than that, the 2 lines are modified and installed. All right, so last of the fuel lines is the feed line to the fuel rail. As you can see, the end that I had already assembled, I've got that attached to the regulator and routing it around to the rail. Looking at how the feed goes in, I'd previously bought a 90, but I mean, to do that, this thing's gonna stick out like here and it's gonna just look terrible. So I went online, I ordered a 180. It's due in a couple of days. So once that comes in, I'll get this cut, get the 180 on. I do still need to get the wiring hooked up for the fuel pump just so I can go ahead, because before I officially attach this here, I would like to run the fuel pump for a second, just purge any crap that might be sitting in the line. Like I said, I cleaned out the regulator, sprayed that out, and then the feed and the return, those should have been pretty good, because I cut a good 3-4 feet off of them, as you can see there. So any debris that might have gotten in the very end of it probably hadn't made it that far down. And this line, once I get the end on it, I'll go ahead and clean it out real quick too before I do a final assembly. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead, wait for that part to come in. Once that comes in, then I can move on and hopefully finish up the fuel lines. All right, so next thing I'm gonna do is I did get the new belt in. This is the 925 length. Hoping this will be the right one finally. So I'm gonna go crawl under the car, see if I can get this on, get enough tension on it where it's not screwing up the alternator as far as hitting the exhaust, and hopefully we can call this part done. All right, well, look at that. We finally have a winner. The belt went on all right. I did have to kind of walk it on the crank. It definitely was a little bit snug. I couldn't just pry it on by hand and get it onto the pulleys, so that's good. And then I was able to put a little bit of tension into it, but it's about where the alternator was set with the original belt that was on this car as far as the distance that it was tightened on the turnbuckles. So all set there. I can finally mark the belt off of my list. On to the next. All right, next on the list is the coil and mount. As you can see here, I do have that new bracket on the bottom of the coil. I've got the bolt and a washer in place. I did have to use a little grinding bit on my drill just to open up this hole to mount or to get this size bolt through, but this is the bolt that goes into the cylinder head. And then there's a little clamp there that I've gotten tightened up that keeps the bracket tight on the coil. So bolts through. After getting that installed, I'm gonna go ahead and mount this on the front of the engine and show you the final results. All right, and there we are, final mount of the coil. It's in place, looks pretty good. Enough length to the wire and everything there, so all set there. Right here, those are the 2 leads that go to the coil from the ECU. One's the positive, obviously, one's the ground. I'm gonna need to extend the positive to the coil And then the ground, actually what I'm going to do is over here, you can see I've got these 2 black wires. These go to a hidden switch in the interior. I'm going to put those in the ground line, and that's basically just a hidden kill switch. So the ignition, you can, have a little theft deterrent device. It was already in the car when I got it, so I just kind of retained it. So I'm going to go ahead, wire those 2 things in place, and that way I can have the coil done. All right, quick update. I did go ahead and snip the ends off, and I have a couple extension wires. I used those solder stick connectors that I use, and then put some shrink wrap over them. I'm gonna go ahead and use Tessa tape, wrap them. I'm gonna run those 2 wires underneath the intake manifold, have them pop out around there, and then I can run the positive to the positive side of the coil, which is right there. And then as far as the negative side, I already have an eyelet on for here, and then I'll just connect this end to the negative side from the ECU, and that will complete my coil circuit. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing wrapped, get the wires run, and then I can go ahead and make my final connections. All right, and here we go, final results. Coil is all wired up. You can see everything is extended, attached, it's all wrapped now. I do have it running underneath the intake manifold, similar to some of the other stuff. So that way it's out of the way. It's not going to hook up any linkage or anything like that. So, yeah, one more thing off the list. Now it kind of leaves finishing up the fuel system and then starting to work on the cooling system, as well as a little more wiring like for the fuel pump relay and a couple of little things that I'll need to tie into the dash. Also have been working on getting the speedometer up to mileage. You can see here that cable that I ordered online. I have it hooked up to the speedometer, and I've just been hooking my drill up to it and running it. I'm actually, both batteries are dead right now, so one's charging. So slowly but surely getting there. And then one other thing I did forget to mention is I did get a clamp here on these lines. You can see it's down there in the 1x1 tube. I basically used a couple of long 3/8" extensions with an adapter to a socket that was the size of the self-tapping screw, and I actually taped the screw onto the end of the socket because tight spot, no real way to get down there with the drill. So, but that should keep the fuel lines off of the bell housing and the starter down there, and that was my goal. So, yeah, you can see how things are coming along slowly but surely. All right, so I moved on to the trunk area to start working on the fuel pump relay, because I had these couple wires here from when I did the rewiring of the car. This is basically the hot that's tied into the fusible link up front, and I did double check that because it's been a while, measured the continuity from the starter solenoid wire to this, and it matched. And these 2 right here, the red and then the red and the black, are from the safety switch that is down in the corner there. The impact safety switch. So what I need to do is drill a hole over here to get down to my fuel pump, because this car does have a remote fuel pump, which you can probably see right there. That blue wire hanging down is the positive that I had cut previously off of that. So I need to go ahead, put one end of the safety switch, or run a wire to that, which I'm going to use the blue and orange, and then that'll go up to the other side of this relay here. And then I need to run a wire down to this plug, which is going to plug into the ECU harness. So anyway, I can't do that right now because I don't have a drill that functions, because I'm still charging batteries. So I think that's going to be a spot where I'm going to stop this video. But there's been quite a bit that's actually happened in it, so it's been pretty productive. Next video I'll pick up probably with working on this, and then the cooling system, and then that fitting I ordered for the fuel system. Hopefully that'll come in. I can get this purged and get the fuel knocked out. So if you like what you're seeing, if you want to keep following along, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. I do read them. I will reply. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.